Good evening. Welcome to our spring concert. We're going to kick it off with our percussion ensemble with a piece called Trixity. It's just this heavy rockin' drum piece that I don't know if there's any like real background to it. Like I did some read up on it. It just seemed like really fun, and that's pretty much the concept of the music for this evening's concert. It's fun music. It's music that I like. I just felt like, you know what, I deserve this. I picked a bunch of music that I was fond of, and hopefully because of that, you'll be fond of it too. So we're gonna kick it off. This is Trixity with our percussion ensemble. Sorry about that. Please welcome Symphonic Band to the stage. So we're going to play a couple selections for you. The first one is a piece entitled Whispers. Again, no huge backstory. There was a collaboration of two composers that had written the piece. Larry Clark was the main composer or arranger on it, and it's written in dedication of a third composer named Sandy Feldstein, who wrote a lot of band music. Other than that, it's just a very pretty, lovely tune, and we don't play enough pretty music, so here is Whispers. Speaking of music that makes you feel good, we're going to do a few selections from Beauty and the Beast. This includes, it's a medley of 3 tunes. It starts off with Belle, and it has Beauty and the Beast, a song within it, and then it ends off with Be Our Guest. So if you're going to go away whistling something tonight, it's going to Be Our Guest. Here is Beauty and the Beast. Please welcome our wind ensemble to the stage. So their first selection is a piece entitled With Each Sunset, and then there's like a little subtitle, Comes the Promise of a New Day. Again, I like pretty music, and it's a pretty song by a great composer, but I also like sunsets. And this piece depicts the experience of maybe sitting on the beach or out in the field and watching that sunset. But the second part of that, that subtitle there, Comes the Promise of a New Day, that kind of gives you hope. Is anyone dealing with things out there? I know I am. So it's nice to be able to know that, you know, with every sunset, there is another day coming ahead of us, another sunrise. And sunrises are just as beautiful. So here is With Each Sunset. Isn't that a cool piece? It's so pretty. Were you on a beach? Where'd you put yourself in that one? Our next selection is it's another medley of tunes. This one is from Les Mis. If you're not familiar with Les Mis, it's a musical and it's a freaking awesome one. Which is why I picked it. I would have to say it's probably my favorite musical. And it's the first one that I got to conduct here in Marine City in the pit band. If you are familiar with it, some of the songs that you're going to hear from this are At the End of the Day, I Dreamed a Dream, Master of the House, which is a really fun one, On My Own, and then it ends off with Do You Hear the People Sing. Hope you enjoy Les Mis. Give us just a moment. We're going to do our combined band setup now. If you've never seen Les Mis, you got to see it. It is very, very good, and it's much better with the words, of course. Here's our full combined band, symphonic, wind, and percussion all out here. And we're going to start this portion of the concert with a piece called Symphonians. This is our traditional, every spring concert we play this one. It's a march that was selected by Paul Decker like 40 years ago. And I think it's been going every spring concert since then, so I'm not going to break that tradition. Who am I, right? But I actually do like the piece, even though I do have to do it every single year. I do really like the piece. It is a fun one, and for some of these kids, I know for Jack in particular, this is actually his favorite piece that he said out of being in band, so which surprised me. But it is a fun one to play. So here's Symphonians. Got one more pretty one for you here. This one's But for the Love of Ireland. Mr. Polio actually gave me this piece of music. He had it in his collection. He says, here, you might as well put that in the library or do this. So I was looking it over. I'm like, this is actually a really good piece of music. It's very pretty. And I mean, how can you not be happy in Ireland? Like I think up here, like I just think everyone's happy there. Nice rolling hills and everything, cattle. It's great. Here it is, But for the Love of Ireland. This next one is called Cartoon Express. I have very fond memories as a kid on Saturday mornings just sitting for hours and hours in front of a TV watching cartoons. And I think that's where my original music education was spawned. Because you ever watch like the Bugs Bunny What's Up, Doc? What's at the Symphony? That one. I think it was that one in particular that made me want to be a conductor. But this one, Cartoon Express, is a medley of a whole bunch of different tunes. We have Merrily We Roll Along. We have Tiny Toon Adventures theme song. I'm Popeye, the Sailor Man. That one goes back a ways. The Pink Panther. Merry-Go-Round Broke Down. And This Is It, theme from the Bugs Bunny show. It's a hoot. It's a fun one to play. Here is Cartoon Express. Thank you so very much. You've been a wonderful audience. I hope you enjoy the rest of your school year. Please drive safe.